Hey guys, I am continuing on once again every other day in September high level hero guides where I'm breaking down the competitive scene and I am looking at the different ways that they are building these heroes and how we can learn from those heroes and their playstyles in our own games, our own competitive games, our own Storm League games, and wherever else we are going to be playing. We're going to be looking at Copen's Malthael, and this, most likely he picked it because he saw the Deathwing on the other team and he went, okay, well, while my percent health damage is a bit more AoE, I definitely think that it would be solid to pick Malthael against Deathwing, and it's also a map that you can double soak and get a lot of value out of too, which is kind of nice, but I did want to show this game because of the fact that a lot of people ask me, they're like, well, how do I approach team fights as Malthael? And I wanted to do a video specifically on that, but I figured it'd be better to just show how a competitive player approaches team fights when they are when they have to deal with people who are the highest level players out there. So in this case, I believe he went to counter the Deathwing. The Deathwing ended up shifting to be in the 4-man rather than the solo lane, and Blaze went into the solo lane, which is actually even better for him because that's more big targets for him to heal off of. Remember that his Q heals 4% of the health of, yeah, that was a little confusing. It heals 4% of the enemy hero's maximum health. So the more tanks that are out there, the more that he can heal. Now you see something that he's doing very quickly. Once he clears top lane, he just goes mid just to see if there's anything that he can do. Maybe clear the lane, maybe even join a team for a team fight, and suddenly he immediately forces a 5v4. And he does it very quickly, and he clears the camp very quickly, which is something that Malthael does very, very well, is ripping through camps. Now, Malthael struggles a little bit in team fights because he can get bursted down rather fast, so you're going to notice that he does a few things. And what he likes to do is he likes to use his W to get out, or he'll use his trait to get out, and then he'll use his W to get back in. And not his trait, his Fear the Reaper, which is his level 1 talent, and I'll talk about his talents a little bit later. But the thing about Malthael is because he tends to struggle a little bit in team fights, you need to get the most value out of macro, which means you need a double soak, you need to be grabbing camps, you need to be joining your team after pressuring the enemy team. There's so much that you need to be doing every single game that you can't simply just leave it to be one or two things, right? You have to be able to get a ton out of each of these games. You can't just do like one. You can't just sit in lane. You know what I mean, guys? Like, you can't just sit here in lane and go, okay, well, I'm gonna just bully the enemy laner, and that's all you do. Now, you see that he's not pushing here because Blaze isn't there. So, because he's already soaking mid with Garrosh, and Val is soaking bottom, and Zarya is getting the camp, there's nothing that he needs to do here, so he decides not to push, and he decides to just let his minions die so that Blaze misses out on soak. And this is another strategy that you can do. When there's nothing to do, you don't need to do something. You always want to be effectively using your time, but sometimes effectively using your time is not pushing. Now, once Blaze shows up, watch what he does. He just pushes. He bullies Blaze, and he pushes. Because Blaze is getting the soak now, and he doesn't want Blaze to get the soak. And he wants to build up a wave so that when he goes down to the objective, Blaze is still busy. That's exactly what happens. He immediately gets on the objective, and he immediately starts melting the objective. He applies his dot to 4 things before he uses Q, and he just honestly dominates. He shreds this objective, and now when these objectives actually start happening, there's a few things that you're going to want to notice that he does that not a lot of people actually do with Malthael. They'll try to walk right into this team and start fighting them, but watch what he does here. He gets hit by a stun, he gets hit by a breath. No, he goes to flank. He pops his ability and he goes to flank. Now, his entire team's trying to flank a little bit. So he goes, once again, back around. He doesn't like walking right in. He likes to try to go around and flank. Now, he's focusing on the objective more so than anything else. But it is still something that you can see he's trying to do. Once they win the objective, it's fast. He immediately leaves the objective and goes right back to the lanes and starts trying to get value. Because you're a macro monster, you want to gain the most value in macro. And that's something that he's always doing. He's always going and trying to get as much value in macro as possible. So, let's talk about his talents for a little bit. Level 1, Fear the Reaper. Fear the Reaper is one of my favorite talents. I think it's pretty underrated since most people are taking on a pale horse. It's your best answer of getting out of a fight that you don't want to be in. And as Malthael, you're probably going to want to flank into a fight, and then very fast in that fight, you're going to find out whether or not you want to stay in that fight or leave that fight. If people are all focusing on you, you want to leave that fight. If no one's focusing on you, you want to stay in that fight forever. We see here that he goes down to mid lane, potentially down to bottom lane, depending on how the fights are going. So you can see on the camera, he checks bottom lane, realizes that his team's safe, and he just gets to soak mid lane. He goes for one more wave here, and you could use your E to try to speed this camp up, or this wave up a little bit. And then he just makes sure that his dot's still applied to the back. He melts down this wave, and then he starts heading back up. Again, focusing on macro, but potentially joining his team. Level 4, instead of going die alone, he's going Throwing Shade. And this is probably just because of the matchup. He's going against 3 potential people to hit. So the increased range on your Shade is going to be huge. The lower cooldown is also going to be huge. And so he ends up going with Throwing Shade. He goes with Massacre instead of the meta, which is Cold Hand. Well, I don't even know if that's the meta anymore. After Liam started running Massacre, I feel like a lot of people run Massacre. I'm not a huge fan of Massacre because I think when you jump in, you generally get an auto attack off, which means that you apply your mark to everyone in the area anyways. So I personally like Touch of Death or Cold Hand. Cold Hand for maps where I can catch people really far out from structures, because then the slow ensures that we get a kill. But Touch of Death's really good against teams that heal. But he ends up taking Massacre, more of the Liam's route on that, and he applies his mark with the longer range Death Shroud, and he could have jumped if he wanted to, but he doesn't really need to. Level 10, Last Rites is the meta, and it's very common. Even against Bunker, it's still something worth picking, because if you can bait the Bunker out early, or you could get your ult out before the Bunker goes, or a little far away from where the Blaze is, then oftentimes they're still going to die to Last Rites. Deathwing did not take the protected talent at 1, so you don't need to worry about that either. So all he really needs to worry about this game is Bunker when he sends out that Last Rites. With everything else, his playstyle, again, is just macro-oriented, but he doesn't like sitting still for very long. Once he's already cleared a lane, there's no point in sitting there. He would rather try to bully someone who shows up, and this is where Lauber's going in for a throw right here. They throw at the Muradin. They immediately Last Rites. Now, this immediate Last Rites is something that used to be done a lot in HGC, oftentimes with a Greymane or a Tychus, where they would immediately Last Rites and then they would hit him with a Cursed Bullet and as much burst as possible, and they would instantly die from the Last Rites. However, in this particular scenario, they don't have as much burst as you normally run in a comp like that. And because they don't have as much burst as you would normally run in a comp like that, it's just extra damage. And it's not a lot of damage, but it's a decent amount of damage. So he throws out a W here, but he's going to pre-tap a Fountain, so he's going to end up having a lot of extra health regen during these fights. And once again, you look to flank generally when you're playing Malthael. He did take a lot of damage there, so he's probably not going to actually be flanking anymore. And he's playing that in and out playstyle. He goes in, activates movement speed, gets out, throws his Shade, goes in, gets a Q or 2 off, and then goes out. So his playstyle is much more in and out than you normally see on a Malthael. Normally Malthaels go in, they stay in and hold Q. But what he's doing in these fights is he's throwing in the Death Shroud. He's applying marks to everyone on whoever, like he'll throw Death Shroud, it only hits the Muradin. He applies marks to everyone in the area, heals off of everyone in the area with his Q, and then he starts running away as he's getting those Qs off. He then throws a Death Shroud out and then another Wraith Strike, making it to where normally with Malthael you don't generally take these long fights, but he's taking them in a very in and out playstyle. Simply just applying marks from a really far range, applying marks to everyone in the area, and then healing off of everyone in the area. Right here, they've already lost this objective. This is a point where if I was playing Malthael, I would just leave and just start pushing out both of these lanes, because ultimately you're not going to gain that much value from doing what he's doing right now. So I definitely think that this should be, this is where, when we were watching most of the other people that have self-healing, they would just go and push out both of these lanes once you've already lost the objective. And this is a fight that they've already lost the objective in. He ends up backing, gains his health back, and he starts heading over to those, but honestly, he could have gained his health back by just clearing those minions. So now he's missed 2 waves mid, and he's sneaking the bottom lane, or the bottom cam, which is good, and then he's going to grab that, and he's going to head mid. Do you see how he almost never sieges? And it's because Malthael's single target damage is not great, and we were trying to dick down a fort. It takes forever because you can't use Q, you can't use W, you can't use E, and all you have is an auto attack, which has been nerfed because you do AoE now. So overall, it's not very good as far as doing siege damage. So he focuses on what he's actually good on, which is wave clear, which is that AoE. And he gets a lot more value off of that. Now he takes Inevitable End. Now when you combine Inevitable End and Fear the Reaper, you can get out of just about any fight. The downside is that Inevitable End removes all of your marks. So if you wanted to leave the fight and then rejoin with a Wraith Strike, you're not going to be able to do that. Right here, he gets about 30% of Deathwing's health down, and now he needs to decide how he wants to approach this fight. He throws an E out, no one gets hit by it, and he decides he's just going to leave. He's going to go do potentially the camp, or he'll just go get some soak. But with his team calling out that they want to invade this camp, he decides that it is a great time for him to join the fight. Once again, he goes at a flank. You got to remember, on Malthael, that's the best way to approach a fight. I mean, I love this playstyle for approaching fights, but if you don't go this playstyle, or even if you are in this playstyle, one of the most effective ways to approach a fight is at a flank, because then you're not getting hit by everyone, and by the time everything starts going crazy, like when everyone starts focusing you, that's where you just pop Fear the Reaper and Inevitable End and leave. But he's not going to be able to do that, unfortunately. He could do a W and a Q to gain just a little bit more life, but he ends up just popping Fear the Reaper and leaving that fight. So far, he's been getting a decent amount of kills. He does have 1 stack on the last rites that he just used to take out Deathwing. As well as far as hero damage done, he's topping Siege, he's topping hero damage, he's topping the experience contributed, and he's doing all of that with no deaths and approaching every fight very carefully. So this playstyle of using your E and your W to apply marks to everyone, getting 1 or 2 Qs off and leaving, it's interesting. It's surprisingly effective. You wouldn't think it would be that effective, but it's surprisingly effective. It's like you're playing a mage at that point. It's just a really weird mage. So this is where you do struggle a little bit. So I do want to mention, if you're playing on a map where you don't need to win the solo lane, like this map, die alone isn't actually necessary. And if you're not going to be catching people out of position really far out and like in between rotations, then die alone and cold hands aren't really necessary. So throwing shade becomes something that is kind of like viable. And with it with Death Shroud being an 8-second cooldown and throwing shade reducing it by 3 seconds, and Massacre being a 5-second cooldown, then he actually has every 5 seconds he can do the same thing. He can E, W, Q, Q on the way out, and then E, W, Q, Q on the way out. And he can continuously play this way, applying marks to everyone, getting heals off of everyone, and getting huge amounts of value without ever being really at risk of dying. Level 16, we'll see if the build shifts at all, or if he ends up just taking the standard Soul Collector, because I think it's really going to make a difference on what he ends up going with there. So he ends up melting down 1 tank, and he decides to go for a second one right here, using his W, melting out that, and then he pops his Unstoppable, but applies the dot 1 more time in case he does decide to chase the Deathwing. but he ends up not going for that. Level 16, we see Mortality. When damaging a hero, Wraith Strike deals bonus damage equal to 8% of the hero's max health. And because he's doing AoE, that 8% should be AoE as well, because this doesn't say it's untalented. It says Wraith Strike now damages and applies Reaper's Marks to enemies around the target, so since it's damaging, Mortality should work. He goes to the objective and starts winning the objective for his team, while his team goes and just gets siege damage in another lane. All in all, it just seems like a very valuable and effective method to have this type of Malthael on your team. But yeah, he gets the objective for his team, and his team's getting all the camps. They take top fort, they take top camp, they take left camp. He grabs a fountain instead of finishing the objective. And let me get a drink. I apologize. He ends up getting a bunch more camps for his team, and he still makes it to the objective in time. He didn't waste any time, right? They got all of those camps without really wasting any time. They still got the objective. They're pushing with the objective. All the camps are pushing in every lane. So even if they don't win off of this push, they're going to get such a considerable amount of value between the camps that were top, the camps that are mid, as well as the camp and the objective that's pushing down here. Once again, he goes with the same playstyle that he's been doing. Leave the fight, throw a Death Shroud, go in with W, leave the fight, use a Death Shroud. In this case, he's going to throw a quick last rites, taking out Deathwing, and he's going to go in. So for all the people asking questions of, how do I approach a fight as Deathwing, or as Malthael, I want you to watch this video and potentially go this build, because this is a very easy way to approach fights on Malthael, and you don't really lose a lot. You lose a little bit of ability at winning in the 1v1, but you gain a huge amount of ability at safely teamfighting and melting down their front line and potentially their back line, while never really having concerns about struggling in a team fight. At level 20, he generally takes No One Can Stop Death, but I do think Final Curtain could be a potential for this type of build, because you leave a zone for 4 seconds, and you're playing safe enough you might not need the respawn, and that zone, you're going to have a 5-second cooldown on it, so that zone is going to be up for a huge portion, 80% of the time. So that is something that you can go, but he generally goes No One Can Stop Death. Hopefully you guys have learned a really cool playstyle from this. I didn't mention the sponsor of this video, or maybe I did, I don't know. Videos are melding together a little bit. But the sponsor of this video is LastPass, the last password that you guys will ever need, because you type one password in and it will give you a password for each of your different things, so you can have different passwords for everything, which is very secure, and you only have to ever remember one password, and that's also 2-step verified, so it's not like people can hack that and get all of your other passwords, because you can 2-step, even 3-step verification if you want to do that. So check out LastPass for free down below, and you can always check out the premium options. It's very inexpensive and has some really awesome features. Also helps out the channel. So thank you guys so much. Check out LastPass. Give me a subscribe. Give me a bell so you guys can see all of the videos that I'm going to be bringing out this week, or this month, because all of September I'm bringing out a video every other day in September. So, and these are all high-level hero guides. So that is what I'm doing. Subscribe. Feel free to check out any of my other videos. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you guys next video.